The golden afternoon sun gleamed off the polished buttons of Corporal James Mitchell's ceremonial uniform as he took his position outside Windsor Castle. At 32, James had served 8 years as a member of the Coldstream Guards, earning respect from colleagues and superiors alike for his unwavering dedication and calm demeanor under pressure. His tall frame stood perfectly straight, rifle held at precisely the correct angle, eyes focused ahead with the disciplined stare that had become second nature. A sleek black Bentley pulled up to the visitors' parking area, its chrome bumpers reflecting the castle's ancient stone walls. From the passenger seat emerged 17-year-old Sebastian Blackwood, heir to billion-dollar pharmaceutical empire and someone who had never heard the word no without finding a way around it. His designer clothes cost more than most people earned in a month, and his arrogant smirk suggested he viewed the world as his personal playground. Sebastian's father, Richard Blackwood, had brought his son to Windsor for a private tour arranged through his extensive political connections. The elder Blackwood was a major donor to various causes and expected preferential treatment wherever he went.
However,
he had been called away for an urgent business call, leaving Sebastian to wander the grounds with only his bodyguard, Thomas, keeping a respectful distance as Sebastian approached the guard post. His attention was immediately drawn to James's imposing presence. The teenager had grown up surrounded by people who catered to his every whim, from servants to teachers who were afraid to discipline the son of such a powerful man. The sight of someone who clearly wouldn't bow to his family's influence intrigued and annoyed him in equal measure. James noticed the approaching figure but maintained his rigid posture. He had encountered wealthy tourists before, and experience had taught him that money often came with an unfortunate sense of entitlement. Through his peripheral vision, he could see the expensive clothes, the confident swagger, and the way the young man seemed to expect the world to move aside for him. The castle grounds were relatively quiet that afternoon. Few other tourists wandered the public areas, but most kept a respectful distance from the guards. The peaceful atmosphere was punctuated only by the distant sound of tour groups and the occasional click of cameras. Sebastian pulled out his latest iPhone, a custom model that wasn't even available to the public yet, and began recording as he approached the motionless guard. "Look at this," Sebastian said to his phone camera, his voice carrying the entitled tone of someone who had never faced real consequences. "Just standing there like a statue. I wonder what it takes to make one of these guys break." His words were loud enough for James to hear clearly, though the guard gave no indication of acknowledgement. Sebastian circled around James like a predator studying its prey, phone camera capturing every angle. His expensive sneakers made soft sounds on the gravel as he moved, deliberately trying to distract the guard. "This is boring," he announced, loudly to no one in particular. "My father owns shares in companies that could buy this whole place. I should get some reaction for that, right?" James had dealt with difficult people before, but there was something particularly grating about this teenager's attitude. The guard's training had prepared him for many situations, but dealing with entitled children of billionaires required a special kind of patience. He kept his breathing steady and his focus sharp, knowing that any reaction would only encourage more disruptive behavior. The young Blackwood heir stepped closer, now just inches from James's face. His breath smelled of expensive cologne and mint, but his words carried the stench of arrogance. "I know you can hear me," Sebastian said, speaking directly into the camera while staring at James. "My family donates millions to charities every year. We probably pay your salary through our taxes. The least you could do is acknowledge your betters." A small group of tourists had begun to gather, sensing drama unfolding. Among them was Margaret Thompson, retired school teacher from Yorkshire, who had seen enough spoiled children in her 40-year career to recognize the type immediately. She shook her head disapprovingly at Sebastian's behavior, though she remained at a respectful distance. Thomas, Sebastian's bodyguard, shifted uncomfortably from his position 20 feet away. The professional security expert knew this kind of behavior could escalate quickly, but his job was to protect Sebastian, not to discipline him. Richard Blackwood paid Thomas extremely well to keep his son safe and out of serious trouble. Though the definition of serious was often debated, Sebastian pulled out his wallet, custom leather piece that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. He extracted a crisp 50-pound note and waved it in front of James's face. "Here's an idea," he said with a cruel smile. "I'll give you this if you just break character for 1 second. Blink, smile, anything. Consider it a tip for the entertainment you're providing." The teenager's actions were becoming increasingly provocative. He began making faces at James, sticking out his tongue and making ridiculous expressions while recording himself. "This is going straight to my social media," Sebastian announced. "Millions of followers are going to see how pathetic these guards are, standing there like mindless robots." Sebastian's frustration grew as his attempts to provoke James continued to fail. He had never encountered someone who could so completely ignore his presence, and it was driving him to increasingly desperate measures. The teenager began snapping, his fingers inches from the guard's ear, making loud whistling sounds, and even jumping up and down in front of him like an overgrown toddler having a tantrum. "This is ridiculous," Sebastian muttered, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "I've never met anyone who wouldn't at least look at me when I'm talking to them." He turned to his bodyguard with an expectant expression. "Him who I am. Tell him about my father's connections." Thomas cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Master Sebastian, perhaps we should rejoin your father. He'll be finished with his call soon." The bodyguard had worked for wealthy families long enough to know when a situation was heading toward trouble, and his instincts were screaming warnings. But Sebastian was not ready to give up. His entire life had been built around getting reactions from people, whether through his family's money, his father's influence, or simply his own demanding personality. The idea that this guard could remain completely unmoved by his presence was both fascinating and infuriating. The crowd of onlookers had grown larger, with more tourists stopping to watch the spectacle. Most were clearly uncomfortable with Sebastian's behavior, whispering among themselves about the disrespectful display. A family from Germany looked particularly appalled, the father explaining to his children in hushed tones that this was not how visitors should behave. Margaret Thompson, the retired teacher, finally stepped forward. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades dealing with difficult students. "Young man, this is absolutely disgraceful behavior. That guard is performing his duty with dignity, and you should show some respect." Sebastian whirled around to face her, his eyes flashing with annoyance. "And who exactly are you to tell me anything? Do you know who my father is? Do you have any idea how much influence my family has?" His voice rose with each word, the veneer of sophistication slipping away to reveal the spoiled child beneath. The confrontation with Margaret seemed to push Sebastian over an invisible line. He turned back to James with renewed determination, his previous playful demeanor replaced by something uglier. "Fine," he said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "If you won't respond to politeness, maybe you'll respond to this." Sebastian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver whistle, the kind used by expensive personal trainers. Without warning, he blew it directly next to James's ear, the sharp, piercing sound echoing off the castle walls. Sudden noise made several tourists jump and cover their ears. But James remained perfectly motionless, though a slight tension appeared in his jaw muscles. "Still nothing?" Sebastian laughed, but there was a hysterical edge to the sound now. "Is unbelievable. I've met robots with more personality." He blew the whistle again, longer and louder this time, holding it just inches from James's face while recording the entire interaction with his other hand. The crowd's murmur of disapproval grew louder. Several people began taking their own videos. But unlike Sebastian's intended humiliation of the guard, these recordings were capturing his own shameful behavior. A young mother quickly covered her small daughter's ears and led her away from the scene. Clearly disgusted by what she was witnessing, James felt his patience being tested in ways his training had never quite prepared him for. The whistle was genuinely painful at such close range, and every instinct told him to step away or tell this spoiled brat to stop. But something deeper than training kept him motionless, a sense of duty that went beyond following orders, a determination not to let this entitled child win through sheer obnoxiousness. Thomas took a hesitant step forward, his professional instincts warring with his employment obligations. "Master Sebastian, your father specifically asked that we avoid drawing attention. Perhaps we should. My father isn't here, Sebastian snapped, not taking his eyes off James. And when he gets back, I'm going to tell him how disrespectfully I was treated by this palace employee. We'll see how long his career lasts after that. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud, revealing the true extent of Sebastian's entitled worldview. But then something unexpected happened. James, still maintaining his rigid posture and forward stare, began to speak in a clear, calm voice that carried across the courtyard. His words were measured and precise, delivered without a hint of anger or defensiveness, but with an authority that made everyone present fall silent. "Young man," James said, his voice cutting through Sebastian's bluster like a sword through silk, "I have served my queen and country for 8 years. I have stood guard in temperatures below freezing and in heat that would make most people faint. I have maintained my post during thunderstorms, protests, and countless attempts by people to distract me from my duty." Sebastian's mouth fell open in shock. This was not what he had expected at all. The guard was speaking, but not in defeat or anger. There was something far more powerful in his calm, controlled tone. James continued speaking, his eyes still fixed ahead, but his voice carrying to every corner of the gathering crowd. "I have served alongside men and women who have sacrificed everything for their country. I have stood at the funerals of comrades who died protecting the freedoms that allow spoiled children to make fools of themselves in public without fear of real consequences." Sebastian's phone began to shake in his hand as the full weight of the guard's words hit him. This was not the reaction he had been hoping for. And suddenly he felt very small, standing before this man who radiated quiet strength and dignity. "Your family's wealth?" James continued, his voice never rising but somehow becoming more commanding with each word.
Oh.
"Your father's influence? Your social media followers? None of these things impress a man who has dedicated his life to something greater than himself. You wave money at me as if I am for sale, but some things cannot be purchased, young man. Honor cannot be bought. Dignity cannot be purchased. Respect must be earned." The crowd around them had grown completely silent, hanging on every word. Margaret Thompson wiped tears from her eyes, moved by the guard's eloquent response to such disrespectful treatment. Other tourists nodded in approval, finally hearing someone stand up to the spoiled teenager's behavior in the most dignified way possible. Sebastian's face had gone pale beneath his expensive tan. For the first time in his 17 years, he was facing someone who was not intimidated by his family name, someone who saw right through his wealth to the empty, entitled person beneath. The whistle fell from his trembling fingers and clattered on the stone ground. "You record me," James said, still maintaining his military bearing, hoping to capture my weakness, to show the world a moment where I fail in my duty. But what you have recorded instead is your own character, or rather, your complete lack of it. Every person watching this video will see not a guard being humiliated, but a young man so bankrupt of real values that he must try to tear down those who serve others. Thomas stepped forward now, his face flushed with embarrassment for his employer's son. Even as a paid bodyguard, he felt compelled to show respect for the guard's powerful words. He placed a gentle but firm hand on Sebastian's shoulder. "Come, Master Sebastian.
Your father will be looking for us."
Sebastian looked around at the faces surrounding him and saw nothing but disappointment and disapproval. His phone was still recording, but now he realized he had captured his own humiliation rather than the guard's. The video showed him behaving like a petulant child while a true professional maintained his dignity despite relentless provocation. James returned to his silent vigil, having said everything that needed to be said. His brief speech had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it had completely transformed the atmosphere in the courtyard. The guard's calm but powerful response had done more than just defend his own dignity. It had taught everyone present a lesson about true strength and character. Sebastian stood frozen for several long moments, his phone still recording his own shame. The teenager who had arrived full of arrogance and superiority now looked lost and confused. He had never encountered anyone who could strip away his pretenses so completely while remaining perfectly calm and respectful. As Thomas gently guided Sebastian away from the scene, the crowd began to disperse. But many lingered to show their respect to James, Several tourists approached to thank him for his dignified response. Though he could only acknowledge them with the slightest nod while maintaining his post, Margaret Thompson stopped before leaving, speaking softly so only James could hear. "That was beautifully handled, young man. You've reminded us all what real character looks like." Her words carried the approval of someone who had spent a lifetime recognizing genuine class when she saw it. Richard Blackwood found his son 20 minutes later, sitting silently in the Bentley with his phone turned off for the first time in months. Thomas explained what had happened, watching the elder Blackwood's face grow increasingly grave as he learned about his son's behavior. Richard was a hard businessman, but he had not built his empire by treating others with disrespect. "You will delete that video," Richard told his son quietly, "and you will write a letter of apology to that guard, a real letter, not some meaningless social media post. You will also donate £50,000 to a military charity in his honor." Sebastian nodded numbly, understanding that his father was more disappointed than angry, which somehow felt worse. The story of the confrontation spread throughout the castle's staff, but not as gossip, as an example of how to handle difficult situations with grace and wisdom. James's measured response became a teaching moment for younger guards and staff members about maintaining dignity under pressure. While still standing up for what is right, years later, Sebastian would remember that afternoon as a turning point in his life. The guard's words had planted seeds of understanding about real worth and character that would slowly grow as he matured. He never posted the video, and eventually he would become known for his charitable work and respectful treatment of others. Though few would ever know it started with a lesson learned from a royal guard who refused to be intimidated by wealth or status. James continued his service with the same dedication and professionalism he had always shown. He never mentioned the incident to his colleagues, considering it simply part of his duty. But his calm, bold response that day became a quiet legend among those who witnessed it, proof that true nobility comes not from birth or wealth, but from character, dignity, and the courage to stand up for what is right, even when faced with those who believe their money makes them untouchable.